So I was supposed to make this video a few days ago, but I was always super tired, so I kept delaying it. Actually, I'm still dead tired right now because I sleep at like 7 AM and wake up at like 2 PM. I know, my life is a mess. Anyways, I wanted to go over my YCS Sydney experience and also explain the decisions that I've made. So most of you already know at this point, but I managed to get top 8 at YCS Sydney playing Crystron, which was a deck that I was considering for several months now. And before anyone asks, I lost in top 8 to Pure Raziel, to Frederick actually, who ended up winning the whole thing, so huge shoutouts to you. I also had an interesting experience at the YCS because I played 0 Malice, but then I played 7 Raziels as well as 2 Mermails, 2 Blue Eyes, and then 2 Rogue decks. And I also lost 9 dice rolls out of 13, so I had to keep going second literally every single time, which is really frustrating because 2 of my 3 losses were basically because I lost the dice roll. Anyways, I started playing the deck around October, but I only started investing huge amounts of time on it starting maybe December. My win rate with the deck was actually pretty high, even when I had like no idea what I was doing with the deck, which kind of made me believe that if I became much better with the deck, my win rate would also become much better, even though it was already good to begin with, you know? So yeah, I told myself I would start investing hundreds of hours into the deck, and that's exactly what I decided to do. And you know, I started learning basically combos for the deck for like 10 hours a day. And eventually, I want to say maybe in January, I was able to say that I mastered the deck. Because of the sheer amount of time and effort that I invested into the deck, I figured I might as well make a spreadsheet on it because, you know, I can always share my knowledge with everyone else who is really willing to do so. And yeah, by the way, I'm really not lying when I say that I have like over 300 hours of experience with the deck because for several weeks non-stop, I kept, you know, testing with the deck and kept drawing hands. But yeah, not only did I have a lot of success with the deck, but I also enjoyed it and I could really see my efforts paying off. And I actually realized that Crystron is the kind of deck that actually rewards you for perfect gameplay, not just for good gameplay, which is interesting. And it catches everyone off guard, including those who actually know how to play against it. And the reason for that is because there's so many different builds of Crystron, like so many other engines that you can splash in it, that your opponent never really knows exactly what to expect. And this is the beauty of playing a deck that can be played with so many other engines. It's because you can always add your own personal twist to it. So I chose to add the Kashtira cards to my Crystron deck because they add a lot of depth to the deck and really makes the deck infinitely better for going first and second. Not only do you have Draco Sack into Cherubini access, which means that you can bridge into your Crystron engine even when your hand is not necessarily the best, but also Fenrir is one heck of a card even without any of that, so you know, it's always nice to have access to like a non-engine card in a way. On top of the 13 hand shops and 3 Forbidden Droplet and a Call by the Grave that I played, so yeah, you can basically say that half of my deck was non-engine. But yeah, I've put in infinite hours into analyzing every engine out there, and I realized that the Kashtiras were the best, followed by the Speedroids, and then the Horus, and last, definitely least, were the Azaminas. As I have explained in my deck profile, Pot of Prosperity and the Molchamis were not necessarily the best, and honestly, I would probably just replace them with something else moving forward. But yeah, other than that, great deck, 10 out of 10, definitely recommend, and would do it again. Alright, now why did I choose to play Crystron at the YCS? For a lot of reasons, and I think you already know it. So first of all, it is a machine deck, and at this point the whole universe knows that I love machine monsters. And the deck plays Cyber Dragon Infinity, so, you know, it's destined for greatness. Second, I'm not much of a fan of Raziel and Malice, and I actually wanted to do everything in my power to not have to play those decks. I'm typically really bad with mid-range decks, and Raziel is not really my cup of tea, and Malice just doesn't, you know, feel right for me to play, you know? And I have absolutely nothing against playing the best deck, but it's just that I'm not trying to play the best deck just because it's the best deck, you know? There has to be some degree of fun and mastery I can feel when playing the deck, and again, I didn't have any of that when I was testing with Raziel and Malice. I also felt that even though the decks this format were insanely powerful and arguably tier 0 depending on how you want to see it, it isn't really the same as, let's say, Yubel and Snake Eye Fiendsmith formats where if you go second and you don't draw like 2-3 hand traps, you are immediately dead. It feels like overall you just need less non-engine to have a chance going second, so the format definitely feels more fair, except that obviously Malice is still like a super high ceiling deck, but that deck also bricks definitely more than Raziel, I want to say. But yeah, like I said, right now if you draw like 1 good hand trap or like 2 decent hand traps, you can make it so that when you go second against your opponent, either you make your opponent pass turn, because again, decks aren't that consistent and not that insane, or your opponent makes a half board that you can definitely interact with. So yeah, going second doesn't feel as doomed to this format, which is the reason why I really feel like this is the perfect timing to explore other kinds of strategies. And again, a very good reason why Din Kabui played Fire King at YCS Birmingham and managed to win the whole thing. Funny enough, Din Kabui was actually one of my main inspirations behind playing Crystron. It's because, you know, it's always nice to see people just play a very unique and fun deck and actually have a lot of success with it, because it really motivates you to play your own deck that is pretty much the same. But yeah, I do remember that a while back I've mentioned something about, you know, two tier 0 formats not necessarily being comparable, and Joshua Schmidt said something very similar. Basically, if you have, let's say, a Ubel and Snake Eye format, and both of these decks are dominating like 80 to 85% of the metagame, and then we have, let's say, Raziel and Malice that are pretty much doing the exact same, they're not necessarily the same again. Like, even though Raziel probably gets a score of 9 out of 10, and Malice maybe a score of 8.9 out of 10, a bunch of other decks are probably around the 8.5 mark, which makes them obviously less good than the top tier decks, but also they're not necessarily that much worse. And to me, Crystron felt like a deck that was probably around the 8.5 out of 10 mark, which is obviously less oppressive than Raziel or Malice, but that doesn't mean that it's significantly less good, because they can always score some points elsewhere. And this brings me to my next point, and also one of my main ones, outplaying your opponents with an Underdog deck. I'll cover this more in depth in another video I plan on doing soon, but basically, playing a worse deck doesn't always mean that you're doomed to have worse results. A huge benefit of playing these under-the-radar decks is that a lot of people don't playtest against them, and they have a far less experience, obviously, against them, so they're more likely to misplay. Therefore, even if your opponent happens to draw the perfect combination of cards to beat you, your opponent might mess up and actually give you an opportunity to win an unwinnable game. And I really can't stress that enough. Keep in mind that if you play a cookie cutter deck like Raziel or Malice, everybody knows how to counter it, so if your opponent draws a good hand, you're kinda screwed. So in other words, you're putting yourself in a position where very often you're just comparing hands with your opponent, and I hate this kind of Yu-Gi-Oh! But then again, when I play Crystron, I feel like sometimes my opponents do have the perfect hands and they manage to mess it up because they don't really know my deck inside and out, and I can capitalize off of that. Again, I'll explain this more in detail soon enough because it is a topic that I wanted to cover for quite a while. Anyways, there is one final reason I chose to play Crystron at the YCS, and it is a pretty valid one. So I decided to take a leap of faith with Crystron and believe in the deck when nobody else did, and I wanted to prove that hard work pays off. Not only that would be great publicity for my Crystron spreadsheet, which by the way you can always buy on my website for $20 US, and the link will be in the top of the description box below, but also performing well with Crystron would prove a point that I've been trying to make for years now. That you should never feel forced to play a deck that you despise to succeed in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because there's always something fun and something cheaper to play out there that is basically just as good, if not sometimes even better. And speaking of budget, Crystron is about to be super budget because of all these reprints out there. Quarion Gondrax is about to get reprinted as a rare in Maze of the Master, and Citri as well as Solfafnir are getting reprinted as commons in the next OTS pack. So yeah, now you basically have no excuse not to be building Crystron. And again, if you want a time-efficient way of mastering Crystron, I definitely recommend my Crystron spreadsheet. Of course, you can always go on YouTube or DB or whatever and then check out how other people play the deck and kind of learn from them. But you'd be starting from scratch if you do that, so it'd take you like dozens or hundreds of hours to really master the deck. Alternatively, with my spreadsheet, you already have all the combos that you need, which again are 53 combos, which is a lot. You also have access to my deck list, as well as a Discord server where everybody helps each other out, as well as access to me where I can answer questions. Anyways, enough with the plug. All that just to say that Crystron best deck, right? Fun decks can win in Yu-Gi-Oh! Too. You don't need to pay your left arm to win, and sometimes you're better off playing the obscure deck. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys very soon with another video. Peace.